like a Scottish blended whiskey. It's been around since the 1700s. It's one of my faves, but it's acquired.
Is it bitter, sweet?
Sweet. It's whiskey blended with spices and honey, and it's a secret recipe. We'll see.
When you say secret recipe, is it like the Secret Service? That's really not a secret.
No, it's like Coca-Cola. Only 2 or 3 people have the recipe.
Oh, okay.
And no one can get it.
All right, well.
Slan Shabbat.
Way smoother than I thought.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's definitely acquired. Tiffany wouldn't like it. It's too sweet for her.
Well, she's the sweet tooth, so she might love it.
But she doesn't like sweet wine.
Yeah, she didn't like port. Was that what we were drinking last time? Okay. So what I want to talk about today is the thing that I've been wrestling with in terms of where I'm at personally. But then I also think that if I'm wrestling with it, perhaps maybe somebody else is. And that's this juxtaposition, this navigation between the work that you're paid for and the work that you're made for. And I don't think, at least for me, the enemy gets in when he whispers things like, you got to choose one or the other.
Right. And you don't necessarily have to choose.
So that's, how do you align your career and your calling? That's the tough part.
So I did not go to school with any intention of getting into QSR whatsoever, right? I actually went to school for pre-med. So I was bound and determined I was going to be a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
I joke now because instead of cutting bodies, I cut bread.
Yeah.
But so my intention was not, I'm going to, have some franchises and do that.
Mm-hmm.
But what ended up happening with it was it became not only the work that I do, but the work that I was made for.
Mm-hmm.
So I think sometimes you end up developing the position that you're in into being the work that you're made for.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're constantly going on and you're uncomfortable, then maybe you need to think of something else.
So then there's a distinction then implicitly there between patience and perseverance.
Mm-hmm.
So when do you know when to dig your heels in versus, yeah, maybe this isn't it?
Well, I think everybody's made differently.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of know in your own timetable. If you're mature enough, you know your own timetable. And you say, all right, I'm going to give myself 2 years. I just got done listening to a podcast, and it was actually a guy from Great Britain, him and his wife. They came to the United States for a job offer. Took it and said, okay, we're going to take this job for a year. And he says, well, 33 years later, I'm becoming a U.S. citizen. And it became not only the job that he was paid for,
Mm-hmm.
but it ended up becoming the job that he was made for. And he gave himself a timetable. He gave himself a timetable of 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
And then after 1 year, it was like, I'm going to keep going a little bit. And it ended up becoming the job that he was made for.
Right.
And he doesn't regret it at all. So I think give yourself a timetable.
Mm-hmm.
Say, I'm going to do this for 1 year, 2 years. And I'm saying a minimum of a year.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I'm going to do this for a month and leave. No, give yourself a minimum of a year.
Yeah.
And I think that applies to any position.
I just read the book So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport. And it lays out a path that I think others have followed. I'm thinking of Ed Milet. I'm thinking of Tim Grover. I'm thinking of David Goggins. These subject matter experts, Goggins in mental toughness, Tim Grover in training, who trained Dwayne Wade, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, Ed Milet, who's this entrepreneurial tycoon. And if you read their books, they're not well written, but they became so good that they could not be ignored to, I'm surmising, a publisher came up to them and said, hey, can you write the book on whatever subject that you're the expert in? And so I've wrestled with that as well, David. It's like, okay, well, am I just not being patient enough? Do I need to become so good that I can't be ignored? And if that happens to be in QSR, then hey, whatever. And then, because Newport makes the claim in his book, where one of the titans that he interviewed, that's exactly what happened. Is this guy's mission was, I forget his name, he wanted to rid the world of all ancient diseases. That was his mission. Mm-hmm. And once he got to a point in his career where he was doing just that, a publisher approached him and said, hey, can you write a book? So it's like, is that what I need to happen? Is that what needs, because you know me, right. know that I want to be a novelist. I want to be a New York Times bestselling author. I want to do all of these things with the written word. But is QSR the lane for it? And I've tried to reckon, or not, maybe that's not the right word, sell myself on, well, what if I just create a compelling enough mission for myself for this, to make this industry as redemptive for everyone else as it was for me? Well, then I could get behind that. But then when you go on places like Reddit or other social platforms where fast food and QSR workers are, and it's almost just, it's met with that sort of message is met with vitriol. They just don't even want to hear it. Their victim mindset has got them so entrenched. It's like, no, fuck you. You don't know what we go through. It's like, okay, well, actually I do. But
so I love the QSR industry.
Yeah.
And I can relate to what everybody goes to, from someone who's working the line to the owner. And yeah, are there days where I'm just like, I wanted to chuck it all and say, the hell with this? Sure. Everybody has those. Yeah. But it is a mindset, and I do think that a lot of people get so caught up in their mind, and I've said this to you before. It's like, we always remember the bad experience, the bad customer, the bad day, but we forget about the 200 customers before that were great. We forget about the 200 good experiences. We forget about the 200 great days that we had. Mm-hmm. And everybody always focuses on the bad day, mm-hmm. And forgets about the good days. And so one of the things that I had to train myself is remember the good days, because the good days far outnumber the bad days. Mm-hmm. But if you get into that mindset, especially in the restaurant industry, in the QSR industry, where you become so focused on the bad customer, the bad day, the bad experience, the bad employee, that's all you see. Mm-hmm. And then that affects your attitude, it affects your mentality, and that's all you hear.
Right.
Like you said, on Reddit. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can dwell on the customer that picked up a cash register and threw it at me across the store, hit me and knocked me out. I can dwell on that. Mm-hmm. But I can also dwell on the customers that, I had a customer that his wife and he came into the store all the time, and I got to know them from visiting that location, that when his wife went into a coma, he asked me to come up to the hospital, bring a piece of bread and wave it under her nose and talk to her, because her coming to my store and talking to me meant so much that he was hoping that might help get her out of a coma.
Yeah.
So am I going to dwell on the guy that threw the cash register at me, or the guy that I became a part of his wife's recovery? Mm-hmm. Most people are going to dwell on that cash register hitting them across, Mm-hmm. But I choose to dwell on the customer that I didn't know him from Adam.
So then what advice would you have for somebody like myself, who is ultra ambitious and is sort of has a tendency to get bored easily, and is so sort of in this spot that I'm wrestling in, where I'm providing in one life but praying for another?
Right. Challenge yourself, inside or outside of the work. Go into the store tomorrow or the next day that you work and say, what is one small thing that I can improve in here? And improve it. And then the next day, what's one small thing that I can improve? Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people, especially when you get management, district manager, senior district manager, franchise, you're looking for the big things
Mm-hmm.
to change,
Mm-hmm.
and you get frustrated because they're not changing. But if you look at the little thing, you eat an elephant one bite at a time.
Mm-hmm.
But if you say, okay, I want to change this big thing, but right now I'm just going to focus on this little thing. Success.
Mm-hmm.
And then now I'm going to focus on this. And pretty soon you say, wow, that big thing got changed.
Right.
Without me really saying, I'm going to change the culture. I'm going to change the way we do this.
Mhm.
You know?
Be careful, Elon. You doing this?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Changing culture is a big thing. Going to the store and saying hi to every single employee that you see when you walk into that store is a small thing.
Yeah.
And gradually, that changes culture.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
It makes. I mean, it makes sense. There's a lot of content from my time at Subway that were great content that served as chapters for this book, and so I also sort of shrugged my shoulders at that.
But I think the QSR. My first job was in the QSR industry.
McDonald's.
My first job was at McDonald's, 16 years old, flipping burgers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I learned a work ethic. I think it should be mandatory that every teenager has to work in the QSR industry. Because what you learn work ethic, you learn customer service, learn how to interact with people. That takes you wherever you go.
You learn collaboration.
Yeah.
You learn empathy. I wouldn't say you learn empathy. There's a chance for you to learn if you're open, and if you're humble enough to those experiences. And if you're humble enough to those experiences, well, I'm a huge proponent of QSR being the proving ground for personal development.
Sure. I mean, yeah. It will challenge you more than I think a lot of other jobs that teenagers get or first job experiences. You know, how many, especially now more so than 30 years ago, I don't know how to wash dishes. Well, you know, I don't know how to, because we have, well, let me show you.
So then what would your advice to me be then? Because you know what I'm wrestling with.
Mm-hmm.
Part of me, as I said, David, I really would love it if I could be a light and help the industry be as redemptive for others as it was for me.
Mm-hmm. But
the problem with that is that, at least from the few interactions I've had, it's like that they don't want that. It's like,
you can only control you.
Yeah.
You can't control someone else.
Right.
So if you want it to be redemptive, show that.
Mm-hmm.
You can't force, I'm going to redeem you. You know, I'm going to help you.
Yeah, I'm not saying that in the messianic sense.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Where I'm like, I see that you're struggling. Here, listen to me, sort of thing.
I think you just have to share your experiences. Some people are going to receive them. Some people aren't.
Mm-hmm.
Those that don't, okay.
Right.
And, you know, those that do, great.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I told you, we've employed thousands and thousands of people. Do you think every single one of them received something or gained something from working for us? No. But there are those that did. You know, they either went on and became more successful in the QSR industry, or they went on and became more successful in some other industry.
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell you that they probably, each of them, if I talked to them, would say, yeah, this foundation, though, this helped me. What I learned in your restaurant, David, helped me here.
Mm-hmm.
What I learned in your restaurant helped me here.
Yeah.
So we're developing leaders, future leaders. We're not necessarily developing future QSR stars.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's the part that stinks a little bit, especially when you're the head of a shop or a district or things like that, is because then you're in the conundrum of. So Dave Tate, who's the owner of Elite FTS, they are a strength equipment company in Columbus, Ohio. Somebody came to him and said, "Why do you invest so much time in your people if they're just going to leave?" And he said, "What if we don't and they stay?"
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I
Right.
mean, I'm working on a book. You know that.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about that.
And that was a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that's a perfect that encapsulates training perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
And pouring yourself into people.
Mm-hmm.
How many people have you and myself poured into that then disappointed us?
Yeah.
And those hurt.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But how many people have we poured into that lit a spark somehow in them?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing back about I remember the bad customer and I forget about the 200. Well, I have to remember, all of the great employees I had and forget about that one that hurt me or disappointed me or,
Mm-hmm.
Screwed me over or
Mm-hmm.
robbed me blind or
Yeah.
whatever,
Mm-hmm. So speaking of work that you're made for, what's your book about?
It's about leading and becoming a servant leader. And as a Christian, I use Jesus as my role model for
Mm-hmm.
that. And so, I can't even say I'm in my first draft. It's just, it's kind of word vomit right now. But that's the goal, is that when I started in the QSR industry, even though I was really young, it was like, I am going to do this and I'm going to lead like this and I'm going to be this person and I'm going to be that person. And realize that's not the way to lead. That's not going to have you success.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've experienced it. I've experienced those kind of leaders, the leaders that it's all about them. And so, based upon on my experiences, I thought, I'm going to use Jesus as my guide because that's my culture, that's my faith, that's where I come from, as how to be a servant leader,
Mm-hmm.
how to pour into people.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the gist, I guess, in a nutshell of what I'm doing. But I wouldn't have been able to write that if I hadn't had 30 years in the QSR industry.
What do you think the book's? What problem is the book solving? Somewhat rhetorical because I've read the manuscript, but
So to me, the world needs leaders,
mm-hmm.
but we don't need loud leaders, or we don't need what myself and what a lot of people think is the leadership model. My hope is that it will redefine or present a different way to lead. And maybe it'll get leaders, but not just leaders. We're all leaders.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a parent, you're a leader, you're leading children. If you're a teacher, you're leading, a classroom. So we're all leaders in some aspect of our life. But I'm hoping that it will get people to not think of what society says is a stereotypical definition of a leader and hold up a different example of this is what a true leader is.
Mm-hmm.
This is someone who poured into 12 people, and him and those 12 people changed the world. And I think you can read it from any faith base that you are.
Yeah, I think there's whether you accept Jesus Christ as your Savior doesn't mean that His teachings aren't applicable to your life.
No, I mean, they're universal. A lot of the stuff that I wrote down, and I was at a family function the other day, shared the manuscript with some of them, and there were a lot of different faith perspectives at that family function, and there were some with no faith perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I said at the time, I said, I'm writing this from my perspective, but these truths are universal. I mean, they're universal.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that servant leadership, radical kindness, I think in our society, people see that as weakness, not strength.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it's strength.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes back to what you said. What if I don't pour into this person and they stay?
Yeah.
So I think that's the goal.
It kind of sounds a little bit in terms of the distinction between weakness and strength. Have you ever read the book Power versus Force
Yeah.
by Hawkins?
Yeah.
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 A little bit like that.
A little bit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But so I'm writing it from my perspective as someone who's been in the QSR industry.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how I think you can be successful in the QSR industry, by modeling this type of leadership. And it does, for lack of a better word, trickle down to your bottom line. Kindness does impact your bottom line.
For people, kindness is not being nice.
No.
Okay. Can you talk about that? That's important. That's a very important distinction, because kindness being liked then will then trip a leader up into being focused on being liked rather than respected.
Right. And there's a big difference between like and respected. Kindness is honesty.
Mm-hmm.
Kindness is not avoiding that difficult conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Kindness isn't this too shall pass.
Mm-hmm. I'm
going to ignore this problem.
Mm-hmm.
That's not kindness.
Right.
It's not kindness to your business. It is not kindness to, I've been thinking about this, is one of the reasons that good people leave is if you ignore the problem of a bad person.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't address a problem with someone, and you're really good at being honest with a person without being derogatory.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I think kindness is not avoiding the difficult conversations, because I want to be kind and I want to be liked.
Yeah.
So that's kindness.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also not being negative to a person too. It's not constantly picking out their flaws.
No, so yeah, no, it's not about nagging, but
and it's about how you have that conversation.
How do you have that conversation?
Yeah. Instead of sitting down and saying, you know what, you screwed up here, you did this here, you didn't follow formula there, your staff, why did you hire this person? They're an idiot. Why don't you fire this person? They're an idiot. Those kind of things. It's like, hey, I've made some observations. Let's talk it out.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those problems are solved just in the conversation that you have. It's not immediately, go out back and get the switch and I'm going to hit you with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, these are my observations. Tell me yours.
Yeah.
What do you think about this? This is what I've observed. What do you think about that? Hey, help me solve this problem here.
Yeah. Perspective.
Right.
Yeah.
I had my old partner. He said, David, you can fire someone with a hug and they turn into your best friend. He says, I don't want to talk to anyone. You go talk to them. You can fire someone with a hug and they'll turn into your best friend. It's perspective. It's how you approach that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Like your line. Hey, Joe. Hey, David. You might not be in the right seat.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about this? Maybe this isn't the right seat for you, but I really see this strength in you. Have you ever thought about going into this?
Mm-hmm.
That's you.
Yeah.
It's not like, hey, you suck at QSR.
Mm-hmm.
It just may not be the right seat for you.
Yeah.
That's different than walking in and saying, you didn't do this right, you didn't do this right, you didn't do that right, your numbers are terrible, your margins are this, you're fired.
What is the work that you're made for? Do you think it's this book?
I never set out to be a person that wrote a book. Yeah, I've written in the past. I like to write. You were the motivation to that. But once I got it out, it's like it was so cathartic, and I didn't realize I needed to get that out
Mm-hmm.
until I started doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And now I can't. Now it's like, so you've had the manuscript for a little bit, and my wife said to me, she goes, is it driving you crazy that Hunter has the manuscript? And I said, yeah, look at all these scraps of paper I've been writing on,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I think I'm at a point where I have to know when to say stop.
What do you mean?
Because I keep changing and adding and subtracting and adding, and I should put this in and I should put that in. And
well, that's you've got 20 drafts ahead of you. So, I mean, I would say carry on.
Yeah. But it's from my perspective in the QSR industry, but it's more about becoming a leader.
And you'd say that's the work that you were made for.
I think so.
Yeah.
Which I didn't realize.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that Stephen King said that he doesn't write what he thinks, he writes to find out what he thinks.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why writing a book is so important. Writing a book is so important that even God wrote a book.
Yeah. Over thousands of years.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But yeah. And now it's like I just want to, even though I may have practiced some of the things that I wrote in the book subconsciously, I can't wait to practice them consciously. Some of them I practiced consciously, but a lot of them it was subconscious.
Okay.
And now that it's like, I can't wait to consciously practice this.
Like what?
Probably the biggest thing is humility.
Yeah.
Being able to pour more into people without it hurting, without getting hurt if what I am trying to impart, they don't grasp onto. That used to hurt.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, but I planted a seed.
Yeah, that's the difficult part for me when it comes to this industry, because it's how do you say this without being pejorative or derogatory? It's just that
instantaneous gratification.
there's a lot of instant gratification in this industry, yeah.
Right.
But the part where I was getting toward was in the certain area, I'm being very careful with my words here. In the areas in which I am trying to help an individual, they just don't have enough depth cognitively to go there with me. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
And that's the frustrating part.
So I had an employee.
Talk about sowing seeds.
Right. Maybe 10 years from now, something that you imparted yesterday grows.
Yeah, I mean,
I had an employee, that high school kid, who, great personality, really he was liked by everybody, great customer service. He was kind of a screw up, and it's like, how can I help this guy not be as big of a screw up, and granted, I was removed from him by 2 or 3 levels in the organization, but it's like, this guy has so much potential. How can I, and I had some conversations with him, and it's like, this is a 17-year-old, screw up.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a letter from him 5 or 6 years ago. And in that letter, there was a check for $10,000. And he said, David, you may not have known this, but I did steal some money while I worked for you. And he said, but it was nowhere near this amount, but I'm feeling called to give you this.
Mm-hmm.
He said, because some of the things that you and I talked about finally have hit home with me.
Mm-hmm.
And he is extremely successful in the position that he's in
mm-hmm.
Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And the irony of all of that is he was a 17-year-old, 16-year-old screw up for me, that he asked me to write a letter of recommendation based upon his attitude, not his work ethic, his attitude, for a big award that he was going to get.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I was hurt 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
This is a kid that I saw so much potential in, and he just didn't take it.
Mm-hmm.
And then out of the blue, I get this letter and a check, and I cashed the check.
Mm-hmm.
I sure did.
Mm-hmm.
Cashed the check and poured it back into the business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That one sticks out a lot.
Yeah.
That one sticks out a lot.
Yeah, so maybe I need to be a little bit more. We talked about patience and perseverance. Maybe it is patience. Maybe it is a little bit of that. But there are some times as well where I'm working next to a 20-year-old gal on the line last week, whenever it was, and she was talking about some of the things that she was going through, and she was telling me that she should be here, there, and the other thing because she turned down a scholarship, because she took the promotion to be a shift lead at the store, and now she's regretting that decision, and look where I could have been now, and I just didn't need to do that then. And I just said, better to know that now at 20 than 40.
Yeah. So
that rocked her. That rocked her. So it's like, that's why I do the job. Like that right there. And I just looked at her and we'll just call her name. We'll just call her Trina. And I just said Trina, I'm telling you, this for me is like, we're on the line. She's passing me 5-layer burritos and I'm talking to her at the same time. Just like, this is the job for me. Like, you don't understand. This is the job. This product, right? Us doing what we're doing, that's process. This, you and I, people.
Yep.
This is the job, right?
Yeah.
And man, so maybe it goes back to what you were saying. How do you have those? How do you try and find those little micro moments every day? Then is that the work that you're made for? But it's also, since you're on the clock, it is also the work that you're getting paid for. So they can dovetail.
Right.
Right. But I need to have a little bit more. I need to delay gratification a little bit more, because obviously producing.
Well, the QSR industry is about instantaneous gratification.
Well, I was speaking more towards like the next
right.
book and getting to this level here and that.
But I think that's one of the things that you fight when you're in the QSR industry, is that instantaneous versus delayed gratification.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're in an industry that is quick service restaurant, QSR.
Mm-hmm.
The customer walks in the door and they better have their food and walk out the door within 5 minutes.
Yeah.
They're instantly gratified.
Mm-hmm.
And our job is to help them be instantly gratified.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of, I think in the QSR industry, we kind of then start manifesting that in our thinking and our thought processes, that we are looking for instantaneous gratification.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that I had to learn, is that sometimes pouring into people isn't instantaneous gratification. Sometimes wanting to solve this big problem may take me months or years. Where I want it to be instantaneous. I want my food costs down 2% by next week.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it ain't gonna happen.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe I can chip away 0.5%. And then, in a month or 2 months, oh wow, it is down 2%.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I wanted it by next week. And if I get stuck in that mindset, I'm not going to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
But if I look at the overall and say, this is the goal, to reduce our food cost by X%, to reduce our labor by X%, to increase our sales, our yield by X%,
Mm-hmm.
I have to remember to say to myself, that may not happen in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month. All right, but in a month, my goal is I want to increase our yield, our AUVs by 5%. But if we can increase them by 0.5% or percent in a month and a half, then the trajectory is there.
Mm-hmm.
So I do have to have some delayed gratification, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think in our industry, we want it all now.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense?
Yes. Then in a word or two, what would you say to somebody like myself, a Christian creative who's wrestling with the work that he's paid for and the work that he's made for?
What success? Go home every night. I ask myself, what one thing did I learn today? Even if it was tiny, tiny, tiny. I learned that employee A doesn't like cats.
Mm-hmm.
I learned one thing today.
Mm-hmm.
What one thing did I accomplish today? You know what? I organized my desk drawer today.
Yeah.
Instead of, I didn't do this, I wanted to do this, I wanted to get this,
Mm-hmm.
what one thing, even if it's small, even if it's minor, nothing, I didn't say the F word once today. And that's been something that, I have thought about.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have a tendency to I should be here by now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm getting there.
Yeah.
A year ago, you weren't a published author.
I was not.
You are today.
I am today.
But a year ago, you desperately wanted to be a published author.
So is it patience or perseverance? And what's the difference?
Good question. You tell me.
I think patience is being still. And I think perseverance is doing everything that you can while knowing and having the faith that God is doing everything he can. And you guys are sort of in this covenantal relationship. It's contract. Covenantal. That's redundant. But
I think with perseverance, in perseverance, you can get disappointed because, or sometimes you can feel like I'm paddling as fast as I can. The duck on the, and why am I not getting to the shore?
Mm-hmm.
But you forget to look behind and see, wow, I am 100 yards away from that shore.
Mm-hmm.
Even though this shore is 500 yards yet.
Mm-hmm.
I've accomplished 100 yards.
Mm-hmm.
But we get in perseverance, you get disappointed sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Because why am I not there now?
Yeah.
Well, in your example, you know what? I wrote 5 paragraphs today. It's 5 more than I had yesterday.
Yep.
You know, I had a great conversation with this person today. Why isn't she here? I think sometimes we have a tendency to, I gave you a lot of great advice. Why didn't you take it?
So no grace.
Yeah. But that person is not me. They think totally different than me. They act totally different than me. In your book, their defaults are different than mine. You know, and sometimes we have a tendency to put ourselves on other people. Well, they don't have that problem.
Yeah.
And if they followed our example, they probably wouldn't have reached the same goal.
Yeah, and I think that some of the part that's really frustrating about some of the individuals in this industry is that the biggest problem they have is the belief that they shouldn't have any.
Right. Yeah.
And that's super frustrating because then, like, again, using an example where I had to check, I think I told you this earlier this week when we talked on the phone. I was asking one of the shift leads this week who I've spent a lot of time with working together, but I haven't really conversed with. And so I just looked at her and I said, you don't got to pull your punches. I got a day left here. How am I doing? And she said, well, I had a conversation with one of the other managers and she said that you're a yeller. I'm like, what? Like, you guys, just for the record, you guys have not seen me yell.
Right.
Yeah. But going back to the perspective thing that we talked about earlier, it was a Saturday. I know exactly what manager she was talking about. It was a Saturday around 12:15, so right in the middle of lunch when we're supposed to be locked down. Everybody's in their spot from 11 to 2. Nobody's moving. Nobody's going to go to the bathroom, not doing anything. And then our drive-through cashier comes up to me and asks if I can manage her meal out so she can go on break. And so then I just whip around the other side of the line and I'm looking at the other shift lead there and I just said, why are we approving breaks in the middle of lunch? And that to her was yelling. And so I said to the gal who told me this, I said, well, thank you. What a gift.
Right.
Because now I need to know. Now I know how that's perceived. Because whether or not it's yelling doesn't matter. Right. Perception is reality, and so I need to work on that.
So in my book, I did devote a chapter to empathy. You know, and perception.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah.
Maddening. Crazy. I told my wife that story, and she started cracking up. She's like, "You guys have never heard Hunter yell."
Right.
Yeah. That there's an implication there that I yell at my wife. That is not the case. Tiffany just saw me at my worst a few times, but yeah. So
how am I perceived? How do I perceive myself, and how am I really? There's a difference between who I am, how I perceive myself, and how others perceive me.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail right on the head there.
And empathy is, how am I perceived?
Yeah. I'm meeting with, I don't know what the hell to call him, mentor, coach, whatever. A guy that I really would like you to meet meeting with him tomorrow. And he's a bigger guy. He's probably 6'3". And that was one of the things that that was an obstacle for him when he was working. And they would say, there's people would say, Bill, I mean, you're this big guy, you're intimidating, you come in, you have this presence about you. And it's just like, he's like, what are you talking about? And then I had that experience. Today's Sunday. On Friday, the AC for our area, was in the store doing a blueprint visit with the RGM of the store there. And it was a slow day. It was the 4th of July. And she just started laughing, and she said, and then her eyes met mine, and I just was like, and she's like, "We're talking about you." And I was like, took my gloves off. I'm like, "Okay, what's going on?" And she just said, "No, you carry yourself in this way that's just like, nobody better fuck with me." I'm like, "Geez."
Well, you know I've gotten that
Yeah,
about you.
yeah, it's like I don't. It's like how do I walk around? Like, do I need to like have my like be sullen with my head down, walk around like a little bitch, or like what? Do you, like,
Well, so you have that perception.
Mhm.
You know, it's like, David, please don't put Hunter over in charge of my store. Please don't put Hunter in charge of my store.
Who has said that? You don't have to say names,
No,
but
you know, I've had this.
Mhm.
You know, and why? You know, because he's mean. He's this. He's loud. He's, you know, and my
he's direct.
right. And my perception is Hunter. You know, Hunter. If you are part of Hunter's group, more than any other district manager, senior district manager that I ever had, Hunter protects his people with his life.
Yeah.
And his people love him.
Mm-hmm.
David, please don't take Hunter away from my store.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to happen, and this is how I'm reshuffling and things.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, the employees that were no longer reporting to Hunter would cry to me. And I'm like, and the employees that were going to get Hunter
We're crying to you.
were crying to me.
Yeah.
But for opposite reasons,
Mhm.
you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that is a perception thing.
Mm-hmm. So to wrap it up, then, how do you think? So David comes to me every now and then. We sort of have this tables turning thing where you said it this week when we spoke on the phone. You said sometimes you're my mentor and sometimes I'm your mentor.
Mentor, mentee.
Yeah.
And the roles change.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So then, if I'm wrestling, and please speak candidly, if I'm wrestling with the work that I'm paid for versus the work that I'm made for, do I need a perspective change in seeing that, oh, these actually dovetail? Or, to use my word, am I just in the wrong seat?
Quit whining.
Yeah.
Quit whining.
Mm-hmm.
Quit focusing so much of your energy and thought process on it.
Yeah. How? I'm so glad you said that because you've never spoken that directly to me before.
I know.
But at the same time, how do you...
I mean, you've said this to me. Quit being a little...
Yeah.
You've said that to me directly.
Yep.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
So I obviously look at it differently than you do because age difference, you know, there's more experience there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it'll happen. It'll
Mm-hmm.
happen when it happens.
Yeah.
But sometimes I think you get so caught up and frustrated in and overthink it.
Oh, yeah. Because I think that there's... I was talking to Tiffany about this earlier this week. I said, I don't know how to quite articulate it, but it's sort of like this very strange space in terms of, yeah, you're 34, you're still young, you got plenty of time, but at the same time, it's like, I feel like even though you have a lot of time, I need to start hitting my stride a little bit because in that, I'm gonna be 40.
So look,
And then right?
but look at,
Because that's becoming a trend, David. Wouldn't you agree in terms of there's a lot of 30-somethings today who are now 40-somethings and they still don't have it, not figured out, because I don't think anybody figures it out, but they're on the path. Does that make sense?
yeah.
Yeah. And so
All right, but look at back to you're 34.
Mm-hmm.
Look at how far you come from 24.
I would whip the 24 version of myself's ass.
Mm-hmm.
I would.
So when I set a goal for myself at 21, 22 years old,
Mhm.
told my wife this. I said, I'm going to be a millionaire by the time I'm 30.
Mhm.
Well, I wasn't by the time I was 30.
Mhm.
Ate me up for a while,
Mhm.
but it's like, but look where I'm at now
Mhm.
to where I was 8 years ago.
Mhm.
And I had to take solace in that, but not just solace. I had to take gratitude and joy
Mhm.
in that I'm not the same person. I'm a better person.
Mhm.
You're a better person. You and I have said this before. If I had met you in your 20s,
You would
we would not be sitting here we would not be talking.
No.
Right?
No. Steroids, womanizing, drugs, club drugs, lots of that.
Read this book.
Yeah.
You'll get mad at Hunter, and then by the end, then you'll like him again.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Didn't I call you on the phone halfway through and said, Hunter, I really hate you right now?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that wraps it up.
Mm-hmm. That wraps it up. So if you're correct me if I'm wrong, so if you're a Christian creative who's wrestling with the work that you're made for versus the work that you're paid for, take it from this man. Quit whining. And I think ultimately, if you stay on the course, i.e. persevere, that you might find the two actually dovetail.
Right. But it also it applies to everything. It
Mhm.
applies to your job in QSR.
Mhm.
Don't go into work whining.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Be a light.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, everybody. I can't tell you the gift that was for me just now.
Was it?
Oh yeah, because
Good.
you've never been that brazen with me before.